Hello, my name is Luan, and I greet you from the not so sunny South Africa today. I would love to know where you are watching from today. So please, in the chat, drop us a message. Tell us where you are. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And also, while you do that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself briefly. And as I tell you about myself, please, as mentioned, use the chat function on the side of your screen and just let us know where you're watching from today. So while we wait for those names to come in, as mentioned, my name is Luan, and I have been a teacher for over 13 years. I'm a language practitioner and Cambridge examiner, so my love of the English language and all things TEFL started a very, very long time ago. So introducing these webinars, presenting these webinars to you, I get to share in your journey, your TEFL journey, and I'm very, very excited to be here. So please remember that today's webinar is about a very particular subject. You're welcome towards the end of the webinar to punch in your questions, anything that you might be wanting to ask us, let us know. And they need to be specifically about today's topic. If you have a question outside of today's topic, please don't stress. Of course, you'll be more than welcome to send us your questions on our tutor support platform. But for today, we talk jobs. So let's get straight into it. No time to waste. All right, so as mentioned earlier, the webinar today is all about jobs and work and where to find work. And it's an exciting one to present to you because I've been there. And I know that you've got tons and tons of questions. But before we get to all those questions and before we get to all these details, let's have a look at who we've got here today. So I've got Adrian Ace. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the webinar with us today. I've got CG from South Africa. Hello and welcome. And all the way from California, USA. It's very nice to have you here. Ashley from South Africa. Hello. And then I have, Kava, I really want to say this correctly, so I'm going to read what I see. Kava Savut from Jamaica. Hello and welcome. We have Shay from Johannesburg, South Africa. Sandra, also from South Africa, Pretoria specifically. And then Tiart, also from South Africa. Welcome. Brittany from South Africa. We have Sarah from the UK. Hello. Esther from Mexico. Wow. And then we have Neil from South Africa. Hello to you. We have someone joining us from the Ukraine. You're so welcome. We have, I've got Smally or Smalley from Trinidad and Tobago. And Irene from Greece, Stephen from South Africa. Hello to you all. It's wonderful to be here with you today. As mentioned, greeting you from the not so sunny South Africa. Let's get straight into it. So when we talk about jobs, everyone has their own idea of what the perfect job is and where is the perfect location. And your TEFL certificate, because if you think about TEFL, at the heart of TEFL lies travel. So your TEFL certificate will give you the opportunity to travel to countries and places that excite you, to teach people from diverse backgrounds, and to teach online from the comfort of your own home. I have done all those things, and I have loved every single minute. At the moment, I teach in South Africa, but I also teach online, and I will never stop doing this because online teaching really, really just keeps you in the industry and also keeps you working during those slow periods. It's a very, very exciting venture. All right, so when you think about all these things, these questions are important to ask yourself before you make the all-important decision of where to go. And also, the next thing that you've got to think about is you've got to be able to think about what you want your perfect day to look like before you start looking for that job. Visualize that job. I want you to do that right now. In fact, think about the perfect teaching job, the perfect TEFL job. Picture yourself there. Where is it? Where would you like to work? What do you expect your typical day to look like? And also, very importantly, what do you need from a job? And I'd like you to visualize these things because this so often helps me, not only in the very beginning when I was searching for my job, but also now when I'm about to make my next move or about to join a new venture. It's a very important question to ask yourself, what do you need? All right. So when we think about all these questions, depending on where you live and what you want to do, there are a number of factors that you would need to consider. To help you, we have created 20 questions that will assist you in the decision making process. It's a big decision. I think we can all agree that these decisions that we make will impact the rest of our lives, possibly. So, these questions, I hope, will give you a little bit more clarity. So, let's get straight into them. Right. So, the first thing you need to think about is, do I want to travel overseas? Think about what countries you would like to go to, and think about whether you would prefer to live in a big city or a small town. Think about what you enjoy in your own home country, and then think about what you'd like, what options you'd like to explore in a working environment. Also, think about what attracts you to a place. What is the cost of living in the country, the town, the city that you're considering? And how does it compare to how you're living right now? Also, think about what is there to do when you're not working? I mean, if you think about it, yes, you're traveling to work. Yes, you're traveling to earn money, but you're also traveling for that cultural experience. You want to be able to sightsee, you want to be able to really get to know the country where you're at. So that's another important thing to consider. And then also culture. Think about, what do you already know about the culture? Can you speak the local language? Do you know a few survival words and phrases in the local language? And although this is not necessary to teach English, it is a good idea to try and learn some of the language while you are there. So think about it. When we go into the classroom, no, you wouldn't need to be able to converse in the mother tongue of your students. But if you are out and about and if you are integrating yourself into the culture, into society, in that particular country, yes, you would most likely need to know a few survival phrases. All right. And then also, think about how long you want to stay in one place. We have TEFL candidates and students and, you know, colleagues that have decided maybe to give one place a year. Maybe you want to hop around a little bit, 3 months per place, 2 months per place. The world is your oyster. And depending on the contracts that are on offer, you'll be able to pick and choose exactly how long you want to stay in a particular place. Also, remember that you are the guest in a host country. So make the effort to learn about the culture and a little bit about the local languages. And then also, food. Think about dietary restrictions. Example, veganism, gluten free. Can you source this type of food where you'll be staying? Very important one, this one. Food is survival. All right. And also, a few other factors to consider. Am I happy to move alone to a new country? Am I moving with family? Am I going there for a little while and then moving my family over? There are a few options and opportunities out there. So, this is a question you would most likely also need to explore a little bit internally and research wise before you make that jump. And then also, will my job allow me to take my young children, for those of you who have children? Is there an English speaking school nearby? Do I need to enroll my children in an online school while I'm there? Are there childcare facilities available? So these are those additional factors that you really need to consider before making the move to the destination of dreams. All right. And then also think about the research you have to do. What, as we mentioned earlier, what attracts you to a place? For For some people, it's the culture. For some people, it's the financial situation over there. For some people, it is the people of a particular country, the food of a particular country. So think about what attracts you to a place before making that decision. And then also, as mentioned earlier, this for me is so important. What is the cost of living? Because very often we see these job opportunities online, on forums, and the salaries look exorbitant. The salaries look amazing. And yes, they probably are, but you've got to consider, what are my costs while living in that particular country? Because as you earn that salary, cost of living could just wipe it out. So you do need to consider those factors when you're before you go. Also, as mentioned earlier, what can you do there when not working? Are there opportunities for you to go out? If you enjoy nightlife, is there an interesting nightlife scene? If you enjoy sightseeing, how inexpensive or how accessible are these places? And then also, finally, do you ultimately want to travel, or do you want to work from home? Do you want to work from home in another country? Doesn't really seem like a very popular option, but you'll be surprised the kinds of questions we get about this topic. So, yes, you've got to consider, do I want to travel abroad? Do I want to work from home? Do I want to work in my home country and work online? These are all factors that you need to consider. Right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the all important contract. Now, I hate admin. I'm not an admin person, I'm not a contract person. But unfortunately, when it comes to teaching, when it comes to hours, when it comes to moving to another country, contracts are important. They protect you. They protect you, they protect your employers, and they also protect the students that you are teaching. So you've got to consider quite a few things when it comes to contract, like the length of the contract. So most contracts are between 6 to 12 months, and many of them are renewable. So you'll maybe go initially for 6 months. The company where you're working at would maybe invite you to stay for another 6 months or even longer. So these contracts are very often renewable. Read the contract very, very carefully and look for the following information. So you've got to think about the hours, the number of face-to-face hours that or online that you'll be teaching per week. 20 classroom hours is equivalent, think about it, 20 classroom hours, those face-to-face interactive moments, those would be equivalent to 40 to 50 hours of work. Sorry, a 40 to 50 hour working week. So that's, you've got to do the math there, and you've got to see whether what you're getting into is financially viable for you. So let me repeat that just to eradicate any confusion. 20 classroom hours is equivalent to about a 40 to 50 hour working week. Think about admin. Is administration and lesson preparation paid for? That extra time. And I've seen that with new teachers, it can be a lengthy process to plan lessons. Are you paid for those hours? And then also, do you have extracurricular activities that you can enjoy? And that the school has to offer. So cultural activities, sports activities that you are involved in and must facilitate after lessons, because very often a teacher's work is not limited to just the classroom, but there are cultural and sports activities that they would maybe want to get you involved in. Has that been clarified in the contract? And then also, do you teach from, this for me is very important, do you teach from pre-prepared materials and a syllabus, or do you need to create everything yourself? Because if you think about it, this would make a huge difference in your admin and prep time. If you're teaching from a pre-prepared syllabus or curriculum given to you by the school, there's still preparation involved, of course, but less than if you had to create every single lesson by yourself from scratch. So something very, very important to clarify with the school before you go. And then also, do you get a classroom assistant? So in lots of countries where the language is just so different, or maybe a different alphabet, or just a huge, huge cultural difference, very often there is a classroom assistant assigned who is familiar with the local language and culture. So this would be another important factor to question, do I get a classroom assistant? And then also, how many different class groups will I teach? And what level will I be teaching? Am I comfortable with those levels? I've only taught maybe beginner in my own country, and I'm being offered upper intermediate students. Can I manage that? And then also, how often will your lessons be observed? So, observation, don't let that make you feel afraid. Observation is really, really useful. I find that if I get observed, I get some constructive criticism and I know how to improve my lessons going forward. And then, will you have a mentor? Someone just to guide you and hold your hand and answer all those questions. And I always say to new teachers, ask questions in the staff room. That staff room is loaded with knowledge and loaded with knowledgeable people. So ask questions. If you're not assigned a mentor, ask questions. But this is another thing you've got to consider before you sign the contract. And then also, could I be moved to a new school during my contract? Because many schools have branches or they have schools in different cities or different huge departments. Is it a possibility that I would be moved around during my contract period? So these are all important. I want to say little things, but they're not little things. These are important things to question and to clarify before signing on the dotted line. And then something very important too, think about those benefits. What will the employer provide? Will the employer provide accommodation for you? And also, uh, what are the terms? Do you get accommodation for the first 3 months and thereafter you have to find your own? Is the accommodation included in the package? Do you need to pay a small fee? That all needs to be crystal clear. And then also, language lessons, are they included? Do you get to learn a little bit of the language? Do they offer that to you? This is a fantastic program I've heard about lately, where our teachers go over, English speaking teachers go over to countries where there is a different language spoken. And on the job, during the working day, or maybe a little bit after, they receive language lessons just to help them and to really just integrate them into the culture, into the society, and into their new lives. And then also medical aid. I mean, it's important in any given country, but does the employer provide that? Transport. Will you be responsible for your commute from home to school and so on? Or do they provide some kind of shuttle or taxi or transport service? Is there a performance bonus? Another important one to question. Return flights to the country and home, are they included in your package or do you need to pay for those? A completion bonus. I didn't even know that a completion bonus existed until I started doing these webinars and really researching the content. So, yes, do I get paid a completion bonus at the end of my contract term? And then also, some countries teach on the weekends. So obviously that would include a Saturday or Sunday. Will this be suitable for you? Little things like that. Important little factors to consider. And then a lot of you will be thinking about maybe going via an agency. And agencies are useful because they do all the legwork for you, yes. But what you've got to ask yourself is, with the agency, will I have the commission taken off my paycheck or my salary? Or does the school pay the agency for this? What are the advantages of using an agency? And also think about security, visa assistance, flights paid. These are all important questions to ask. So my advice to you is, after watching this webinar, rewatch it, make notes of all these important things, because before you sign on the dotted line, before you sign up with an agency, even initially, these are important things to question. Very, very important. This is a big adventure, but all these important things have to be discussed beforehand. And then you've got some homework to do, teachers. Teachers have homework too. You've got to do some research. Where is the school? How long has the school been in existence? How long have they been operating for? How many students attend the school? And what other courses, other than teaching English, which is what you're applying for, but what other courses do these schools offer? And how many centers do these schools have? Some of them might be sort of one particular body. Other schools, as mentioned earlier, may have branches or departments in other cities, in other towns, in the same town. So find out as much as you can about this. And then something I love to do is scan the internet for reviews. Have a look at what students are saying about the school. Because I know that it's good to get information from other teachers, of course. It's very, very useful to brainstorm and to pick the brains of another teacher. But I think that what the students have to say about the school also really, really tells you invaluable information. So find out what students are saying online. Right. So the next thing that you need to do is some more visualization. And, since there are so many different types of jobs available, it is a good idea to spend some time visualizing your ideal class. Am I comfortable teaching young children or adults? Some language schools might have a mix, so they might have children in the morning and adults attending a little bit later. Are you comfortable with that? Also, think about language level. Do you feel comfortable teaching absolute beginners? Are you more comfortable with intermediate or advanced level students? So think about the levels that you're comfortable teaching. Visualize that before making your decisions. And remember, just a reminder, it can be very challenging teaching a beginner class or an A1 level class if you cannot speak even a few words in their home language. So a lot of people tend to think, I want to teach beginners, it's nice and easy, they don't ask complicated questions. All true. But if you do not speak a few words in their mother tongue, can be a really difficult situation, some tricky situations in the classroom. Right. So, things to think about before you travel. More admin, I know. I'm not an admin fan, but again, cannot travel anywhere without your passport. So, make sure that you've got all these documents ready, up to date, valid before you move overseas. Your passport, your health certificate, a vaccination passport, police checks, criminal background checks, and also make sure that you know whether your documents need to be certified in any way, internationally notarized. Make sure that you've met those requirements before applying, before going over. So I cannot answer the questions for each and every country, of course not. But what I do know is some countries demand this and some countries not. So it would be a really useful exercise to find out as much as you can in advance. Right. And then some money situations, some money factors to consider. Do I need to a bank account? Do I need a bank account? Will I need to open a new bank account overseas? Tax implications of working overseas. Do I need to pay tax while I'm working overseas? Where does the tax apply? Do I pay in my own country? Do I pay in that new country? So those are all things to consider. And also, do I need health insurance in case I fall ill? So when it comes to planning, as you can see, there's a lot to cover, of course. Everything from visualizing your dream destination right down to the paperwork, right down to going to the police station and having documents certified, right down to speaking to a tax practitioner or just someone who is knowledgeable about tax, bank accounts, that sort of thing. So there's a lot to consider, I know, but it is a really, really exciting adventure. And if you've got all your ducks in a row, if you've really thought about absolutely everything, it can only be pleasurable. So I think that when we want to make this jump, yes, there are lots and lots of things to consider before jumping on that aeroplane and jetting off to a beautiful and exciting destination. But yes, there's a lot of planning, and I think that, like I mentioned earlier, lots of research, all those ducks in a row, and you'll be able to really settle on a job that is an ideal fit for you. So, when thinking again about that perfect job, just for a second, again, I want you to visualize. Visualize everything from your travel to school in the mornings. Think about the colleagues. Think about the school building. Think about the setting. Where is the school? Is it in a beautiful rural area, or is it in the heart of a very, very amazing, funky city? So think about that. Visualize it. And then also think about the age group. So you walk into your classroom. What do you see? Do you see cute littlies sitting there waiting for you? Do you see really motivated adults? Do you see some teens who don't always want to be there, but hey, they're in class today? So visualize exactly what you want and then take it from there. I always say that that is the best jumping off point. Also, remember that because you've enrolled on our course, download our prospectus. Have a look, see what jobs are available, see what different countries require before you move there. Do countries require a degree or not? Do countries require a special visa or not? So, download the prospectus, please have a look. And then, as mentioned, if you do not ask your all important questions today, you can ask those questions on Tutor Support. We are more than happy to assist you. So, also, what I'd like to mention is that today, of course, as a teacher who has worked overseas, has worked in South Africa, I have been working online. I may not be able to answer all your questions about every single country and what they expect. I wish I had all that information just stuck in my head, but I don't. So if I cannot answer your question, please do some research, ask on Tutor Support, and we will be able to help you. But right now is your moment to ask those all important questions. So if you've got any questions about today's webinar, please put them in the chat function and I will answer as many of them as I can before our time runs out. If I don't get to all your questions, please don't panic. Of course, you'll be able to ask them on Tutor Support. Right, so let's get into Q&A. So please ask your questions. You'll be able to put the questions in the chat function and I will get to as many of them as possible. But in the interim, while we wait for those questions to come in, we've had a few extra people dropping in and I've got someone from Lesotho. Wonderful to have you here with us. And then I've also got Kaylin from South Africa. Hello. And also Judy from Grenada. And you know what's lovely is that I've seen a few of your names in our previous webinars. So it's fantastic to see you joining these on a weekly basis. I think they can only help. And remember, if you do not get to watch the full webinar or if you missed the first part, these webinars are available online a few days after they've been recorded. So you will absolutely get to catch up on anything that you might have missed. I hope that's clear because we really, really would love to help you. Okay, so I've got a few questions here. All right, more of a comment than a question. I'd like to teach English to the Ukrainians who have arrived in Wales under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. I think that's amazing. One of my very first teaching jobs was teaching people who were leaving one country and seeking refuge and safety in another. And it was fantastic. We just connected, we were able to share so many experiences. So I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I'm very, very excited for you. If you have any questions about this, let us know. Otherwise, do as much research as you can before then. And it sounds like you're good to go. It sounds like you've made your decision. That's very exciting. I'm very, very happy for you. All right. Okay, so this is a question, and it's going to feel like a complete cop out now, but it says, how long does the entire process take from applying for the job to applying to that country? So this would depend very much on what you've already got in place, your passport and things like that. So, it just depends. It does differ. It can take a couple of months, it can take a few months. Some people have even taken a full year, but that's not because the process is that slow. That's maybe got to do more with, just planning and deciding and finding um, employment over there, not only finding employment, but finding accommodation, that sort of thing. So it can take, just a couple of months, it can take a few months. When I do the weekend face-to-face courses, I often ask this question: who's going overseas? How long did it take you? And I will tell you, Manshi, that it's taken everything from a couple of months to 6 months to 4 months, just depending on what you've already got in place and what the country's requirements are. I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but it does differ so vastly. All right. And then a question, okay, any tips for job searching as an older applicant, 40s, 50s, and older? A lot of job postings have age limitations. So what I've discovered is that TEFL is that one amazing opportunity where age benefits you. There are lots and lots of countries, for example, that give a lot of credibility to older teachers, to more mature teachers, and I find that it isn't really a limitation in that sense. Of course, yes, there are countries where they may be, not countries per se, sorry, not countries, but maybe particular schools where they want slightly younger teachers. But I have colleagues, I have TEFL candidates who have been on our courses, living currently and teaching English in their retirement. So I'm in my 40s. I have no issue finding work. It's been amazing. I started my career, if you think about it, 13 years ago, so relatively later on. So already a more mature teacher anyway. So believe me that if you find the right fit for you, there are options out there. And as mentioned earlier, check culturally, because a lot of these countries actually want mature teachers on staff. They want a balance, but they definitely want mature teachers too. So please keep applying. Yeah, there is a demand and there is a market out there. We had an interview on radio a few weeks ago about this exact topic. So please search on our site and on our YouTube channels and so on, and just see if you can find it. If not, I'll be more than happy to answer more of these questions on Tutor Sport. But yes, there is hope, and it's very, very exciting. All right, so we've got a question here. Does the TEFL Academy assist in getting you a job after you complete your course? So no, we do not do recruitment per se. It's a huge responsibility to place someone, especially in another country. So what we do is we just try our best to put you on the right path. We've got a jobs board that you're able to use while you're on the course. And I think, I stand, please, I'm not 100% sure about this, but you have access to it a little bit after. And then also we've got internship programs that you can join, but no, we don't physically place you in a position. We can steer you, we can help you, but we don't offer a recruitment service. No. All right. I think, yes, there was another question about this. I'll be moving to Vietnam. Will I be assisted with employment once I'm done? As mentioned earlier, to answer the question just before this, no, we do not place, we do not offer a recruitment service, but we can definitely advise and help you understand what the job market is like in Vietnam. So please have a look at our prospectus, Neil. It's really loaded with lots and lots of information. And then also speak to people on forums, because very often on these teacher forums, they advertise job opportunities. And I've only heard amazing things about working in Vietnam, South Korea, all amazing opportunities. So I wish you well. All right. So for online teaching jobs, can you suggest some platforms like the TEFL Jobs Board to have a look at? And what do you think about Cambly? And are there other platforms? So I'm not really going to discuss particular companies. I think that, do a little bit of research, see what works for you. Cambly is legit, that I do know. Yeah, but I think when it comes to platforms, the jobs board, our jobs board doesn't only contain particular jobs, but there are links to other sites where you can search for jobs. So please have a look. And then also, there are lots of sites out there where online teaching is a focus. So please have a look and see. Um, that's how I found some of my online work. And then also advertise yourself on Facebook and on all these social media platforms. I think I just showed my age by mentioning Facebook there, but yes, absolutely advertise yourself, see what's available online. A lot of your previous students, maybe, like say for example you start working at schools or around the world, you do start getting online inquiries as you go along, and the word spreads, and they definitely start to tell colleagues and friends about you. So that's how the word spreads. But when it comes to other platforms, please start with the jobs board. Have a look at not only the individual job placements, but also other sites that we've loaded on there that give you access to maybe a wider variety and a wider scope of employment opportunities. All right. Lots of thank yous coming in. You're absolutely welcome. All right. So there's another question here. Which country should we prefer as a beginner? Oh, Manshi, that is not a fair question to ask me because I think every country is amazing. But when it comes to being a beginner teacher, I think, Manshi, the best thing to do is to really decide what you would feel comfortable in and what kind of environment you would feel comfortable in. I will tell you that what a lot of new teachers tend to do is don't forget the English speaking countries, because in the English speaking countries, like if you travel to the UK, for example, or Australia, Canada, um, there are also language schools there. So they employ teachers, they employ TEFL teachers, and you're able to work in an English speaking environment, teaching students that travel to that country in order to learn English. So if you're afraid of language barriers or you're not feeling so comfortable about integrating into a new culture, which I really think you should, but if you don't want to, don't forget that English speaking destinations also offer fantastic employment opportunities where you are in an English speaking environment, but you have loads of students just coming from all around the world. So when I was in the UK, this was my experience. It's fantastic. All right, so let's see. Okay, so another great question here. When arriving in another country like China, do I know have to excuse me, do I have to know their language in detail or only the basics? So, as mentioned earlier, when you move to any other country, survival is your first instinct. So, learn those survival phrases first and foremost. I'm lost. Where is this place? Where is that place? How do I find? Learn the words for taxi. So I think that it's important maybe just to cover the basics. And then once you're there, see what you're comfortable with and what the expectation is. Speak to the school that's recruiting you. Ask them, would it be necessary for me to learn the language before I come there, or do you have any advice? So, my advice from an outside perspective, learn some survival phrases, learn a few survival phrases and words. But once you've applied, ask the school and see what they can help you with. All right. So another really valid question, can race, religion, and English being your second language somehow affect you getting a job? So if I look at my bunch of colleagues at the various schools and schools that I work at and platforms that I work on, absolutely not. I think that the world has just become so open to learning, and that learning is the primary focus. So teachers' race or religion or teachers accent sounding a little different to mine, it's all things our students embrace. I've worked at schools where my director of studies or my academic manager is from Hungary or Lebanon. So it's incredible. And no, it's absolutely not a stumbling block, not in any shape or form. If English is not your first language, the only thing you need to do when applying for jobs is possibly showing some kind of authentic certificate just to show. And that could be a Cambridge certificate like the CAE or CPE certificate. So have a look at those. If you don't feel that confident, think about getting a certificate just to prove your English ability and just slot that in right there with your CV so that applying for jobs, you don't feel less confident because maybe English is not your first language. As for race and religion, absolutely nothing to say about that because I think the world of the student world, they absolutely just embrace learning and the teacher. It's actually it's beautiful and it's a great exchange and it's very, very exciting. All right. Any other questions? We've got a few comments, but we don't have any more questions. So if you've got anything that you'd like to ask, please do. Let me just scan and see if I have maybe missed anything. Oh, yes, I have. Okay, sorry about that, Kaylin. Just want to find out how long the TEFL certificate is valid for. The TEFL certificate does not expire, but obviously, if you apply for a job in TEFL and the last time you taught was maybe, 8, 9 years ago, it might be something that you might want to revisit or do another course or refresh your certificate in some way. Or maybe get a few volunteer jobs just to get back into teaching before applying for those big positions. Because while it doesn't expire, um, for example, if I recruit new teachers at the schools that I work with, I definitely would look at how long ago you've been in the classroom. And if it's a decade or ages ago, I would want to know, whether you'll be willing to reintegrate, start teaching, get some online experience, that sort of thing. So TEFL certificate, valid for life. But again, if you're applying for a job and you haven't been in the classroom for a long time, that might be something that your employer would consider and that you need to consider revisiting. I really hope that helps. All right. Are there any other questions? I think we've got a couple of new comments in. All right. A similar question to earlier. With English being my second language, would my accent hinder the job process? So, Manshi, something I have discovered is that when, for example, you have an accent, as long as your English is clear and accurate, your students are all right. So we've had teachers from all walks of life walking into the classroom. Students embrace the difference, they love it. And they sometimes ask you, where are you from? Or what's that accent? As long as there's clarity in your pronunciation, and accuracy in what you're teaching and what you're putting out there verbally, it's fine. So I would say rather just work on accuracy, rather work on clarity than having no one needs to change their accent. Absolutely not. I always tell people, please don't lose your accent. It's absolutely beautiful. So when it comes to accent, just make sure that it's clear when you speak to your students and again, accurate. All right. I hope that helps. All right. So an interesting question here. Is there much opportunity to help refugees in various parts of Europe to learn English online? So I'm going to give you the most basic answer, and that's I don't know. What I do know is that there are programs out there. So absolutely do research it. As mentioned, when I did my TEFL and my CELTA, I worked with refugees. I got to teach refugee students, and it was a very enriching experience. And that's here in South Africa. So I'm not quite sure what the scene is in Europe at the moment and online, but it is definitely something that it's a thing. So it absolutely happens. So I think just do a little bit of homework there and see what you can find out. Because again, it's an amazing experience. All right, so I've got another question here. With teaching, with online teaching, can you give us some ideas of hours of the day that people tend towards for their lesson choices and how it corresponds to the ages of the students and level? Okay, so this is a fantastic question because, Adrian, I will tell you that I worked for a school in Taiwan not too long, no, I say not too long ago, a long time ago. And this was an online outfit, a fantastic school. And we had a variety of students, but it was all one-on-one. The students didn't want group situations, they wanted one-on-one lessons, which is fine. I, in fact, think it's quite a nice way to get you into the group setting. But I had some younger learners, so aged 9 to 11, and then I had some working professionals. And yes, there's a difference. So the younger learners, they had their lessons with me at about 1 to 2 p.m. in the afternoons, and the adult learners as late as 5 and 6. So I can't remember the time difference, but what I do know is that those lessons were quite late for the adult learners, and that's because lots of them want the lessons after work. Whereas the younger learners do the lessons after school. And what I found out was that lots of the kids that I was teaching would come home from school. They would do things like have a little bit of lunch, change their clothes, and then they'd actually go back to school for further study, and they would do the lessons with me in that little gap in between. So it differs a little bit here and there. And then also, if you're working privately, Adrian, for example, I had students in Brazil. And they are, if I think about South African time, they're about 5 hours behind us, which means by the time I want to wrap things up at 5 o'clock, they're coming home from work and they want their lessons then. So it's something that you're going to have to navigate and see what works for you. This was a problem for me because I want to wrap things up at 5 o'clock. I want to switch the computer off for 6 o'clock. Okay, 6 o'clock. I want to switch the computer off and I want to start my evening. I don't want to start teaching. But then there are students or colleagues of mine that feel differently. They want to work into the wee hours of the morning, so they get to work with students from other parts of the world. It differs, but it's exciting. So, Adrian, you've got to decide, am I a night owl or am I a creature of 9 to 5? And then make that decision because while we sleep, the world is learning English. All right. Okay, so this is a question I appreciate very much. Have you had experience working with teachers who has a physical disability? Yes. And again, it's not really caused any issue. We have a few teacher trainers that have challenges with movement and physical challenges, and no, it hasn't caused any issue. I have found observing lessons where teachers with physical challenges and disabilities have taught, the students just get into it. I had a teacher on one of my courses, and she had a speech challenge, and her MO, her rationale was walk into the class and say, right, this is the situation, this is what's going to happen. Diffuse the situation immediately. And the students appreciated things so much more just because it was something new, it was something different, it was something to get to learn and understand. So, absolutely, in my experience, not a problem at all, not by a long shot. All right, so another question. Can I ask you if you had some knowledge of the language of the refugees you taught, or did you manage without? Were there any adult students? I'm going to start from the back. Were there any adult students? They were all adult students. Did I manage without? Yes, I managed without. I cannot speak I could not speak their mother tongue, not at all. So in the classroom, we had a total immersion situation, and that's where, from the moment they set foot into the classroom, it's English. It's learn in English, it's express ourselves in English, it is ask questions in English. So what I did was I taught them a few very basic questions. What does it mean? How do you say it? How do you spell it? And can I leave I have a question. I taught them a few little phrases right at the very beginning, and I wasn't concerned about the fact that the questions were too intricate for their level because I thought, you know what, this is survival. So it was a total immersion experience with a few questions just to help us along the way. I did not have a teacher's assistant, so for me, it was a whole new world. But we managed and they learned and they got their certificates by the end of the process. It was a dream. So, no, you do not have to speak the language of your learners in the classroom. What I mentioned earlier, by learning a few phrases and useful words, is if you're moving to another country and outside of the classroom, you need to survive, or just be able to converse on a very basic level to find out if your students are physically okay, if they're comfortable. So, that sort of thing. But other than that, absolutely not. That was my experience. Thank you for asking. All right. And then we've got a couple of extra questions here. Lots of questions coming in. Um, all right, so let's have a look. Similar to my prior question, doesn't matter. As a beginner in teaching, should I prefer or should I opt for a group of elementary schoolers to teach or adults? Now, remember the first thing, Manshi, that you've got to remember is that level and age are not always related. You can have elementary adults and you can have advanced children because level is just their English competency. It's got nothing to do with age. Sometimes, yes, at a primary school or a high school, yes, the level of English is similar at a similar age group. But in most cases, as mentioned, you could be working with adults who know very little English and would be categorized as beginners. So when you are a new teacher, in my experience, it was easier, yes, to teach the lower levels because the content was easier for me to understand, so easier to plan. And the questions they asked in class were manageable for me. They were not too overwhelming. I knew the answers, so I could actually help them. But as mentioned earlier, the difficulty comes when you have to maybe, you know, talk to them and explain things in other ways because English is not their language, they're not quite there yet. So it's quite exhausting, but it's doable. And it's doable without knowing their language. But as mentioned earlier, I find lower levels easier to teach. But as mentioned, level and age not always related. That is something very important I need to stress with all of you today. All right, some more questions have come in. Oh, some money questions here. Shannon, thank you for your question. What pays more, business English or teaching students? So remember, business English, you're also teaching students. But I will say that as soon as a product becomes niche, as soon as a product is a little bit specific, like English for specific purposes, yes, some schools do pay extra, and also some teachers, if they're working freelance or if you're working on a platform where you can dictate your own rate, yes, sometimes it does cost a little bit more than your general English class, is what I think you're trying to differentiate between your business English classes and your general English classes. So if you're working for a language school, Shannon, very often the pay is the same. It's you per hour. If, however, you are calling your own rates and working on a platform where you get to decide how much you want to charge, I have seen, yes, that business English is a little bit more expensive. Um, Another route a lot of business English students take is to work at, not business English students, sorry, business English teachers. Another route they take is to work through companies. So you work at a like you go in from maybe 5 till 7 every evening and you teach the students there to speak English. So that also happens. And then again, I think you get to call your own rates so you can decide just how much. I do think that you do need to do a bit of research. If you are calling your own rates, do your research to see what's compatible, so that you're not going in at the top end and sort of losing jobs because you're too expensive, and certainly that you're not undercharging because business English takes a lot of planning. a lot of planning. And I'll tell you why. Because very often in a business English class, the students are at different levels. You might have some intermediate students, you might have some upper intermediate students, you might have some advanced proficiency level students, which means that your lesson has got to span over those levels. A little bit tricky to plan and a bit tricky to facilitate and monitor in class. So yes, they do sometimes cost a little bit more. I hope that helps. Let's see. Nice comment here. Of course, you're very welcome. Sounds like it was loads of fun. It was. But also, I have to tell you, not only fun, but very enriching. Um, Something really great in the classroom is that exchange between teacher and student because you go in thinking you're teaching, but you're learning so much. Yes, you're teaching English, but you're just getting all this rich information and emotion coming from students in your classroom. So at the end of the day, you're exhausted, but not necessarily in a bad way, just because there was so much to take in and so much to learn. And I will tell you that very often your experiences in the classroom help you plan the next day and the next day and the next day and really fine tune your lessons so that your students get the absolute best out of the lesson. Lots of fun and never a dull moment. All right. I'm going through to make sure that I absolutely have not missed any questions. If I have, and your question was not answered, please, I'm going to ask you to smack it in there again so that I can actually get to it, because I really, really would like to answer each and every question. And if by the end of the process I haven't managed to answer your questions, then absolutely remember you can ask us all your questions on the tutor support. All right, so more money questions. What pays more, one-on-one or groups in classrooms? So again, this differs from school to school, outfit to outfit. Um, if you're teaching on your own and you have sourced your students privately, then of course you dictate the cost. Schools have a set rate that they might pay teachers, and they pay you that rate whether you're teaching a group or whether you're teaching one-on-one. So just to be clear, Tiat, if you're teaching at a language school, you as a teacher, you are paid an hourly rate, and it doesn't matter whether you're teaching a big group and it doesn't matter whether you're teaching one-on-one. That's the same. If, however, you have found your students privately outside of the school environment, then of course you get to make that call. I tend to charge a little bit more. This is me personally for exam preparation classes, for example. So it's not so much about the one-on-one or group setting. It's more about what do my students want out of the lesson. So I've got students online that are doing the Cambridge English preparation, exam preparation courses. A lot of prep goes into that. I've got business English students, as mentioned earlier, a lot of prep goes into that. Marking after hours goes into those lessons. So those tend to be a little bit more expensive, but that is when I call my own rates. All right, I hope that helps. All right. Okay, I'm glad that could help you. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to be jumping into any more questions now. I'm really sorry about that, but we have come to the end of our webinar. I really, really do want you to be able to ask these questions, though. So, remember, if you have thought of something only now and we're wrapping up, you can absolutely ask your questions on tutor support. And our tutors there, I'm one of them. Our tutors, they will be more than happy to give you the information that you need. So please, please, please do ask your all important questions. All right. So please remember that these webinars, they do happen every single week. We have these running, and you're more than welcome to join them on a repeat basis. And if you do only catch half of it, these are available a few days after recording, and you'll be able to rewatch. And say, for example, you've had some questions today that didn't get answered, but you do want to ask, you can absolutely, we do recycle some of these a little bit later on, and you can ask those pertinent questions. Again, your questions are very important to us. So thank you for attending, and thank you for the great feedback in the chat function over there. It's really lovely to see. It's an absolute pleasure. And I do need for you to tell us how you felt about today's webinar. We always need feedback, and we always want you to tell us what you enjoyed and what you found useful, what we can improve. So right now, I'm putting the survey into the chat. Please copy it into your browser so that you can finish it later on for us or tomorrow. It's really, really useful for us to get that kind of feedback. All right. And I'm really happy that you enjoyed the session. Join us again next week. Tons of useful information coming your way. So thank you again for joining. It was lovely being with you, and hope to see you soon. Take care. Be safe out there.